You're listening to the Longer Haul Youth Ministry Podcast with Jody Livingston and Chris Trent. Episode number 67.
Welcome to the Longer Haul Youth Ministry Podcast, helping you survive and thrive in youth ministry. And now, your hosts, Jody Livingston and Chris Trent.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the show today. Thanks for tuning in and listening wherever you are and wherever this finds you. Thanks for making this podcast today a part of your day. If it's your first time listening to the show, you're a new listener, welcome to the show. We're glad you're here. And if you are a part of the Longer Haul community and you are still listening, then we're grateful for you as well. If you enjoy the show, find it helpful, we would love for you to share it with somebody. Make sure you subscribe to the show so that you can get the episodes as they come out each and every time. And enjoy all the goodness that comes our way.
Yeah, so we're Jody. I'm not Jody Livingston. He's Jody Livingston. I'm Chris Trent, and we are totally. What? We're not totally. That's although I grew up in the '80s. We're totally, but we're youth pastors, right?
You just went like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle.
I did totally. Oh, I did it again. No, we're a couple of youth pastors, man. We both happen to live in Atlanta, but we don't work at the same church. And Jody works with 7th through 12th graders and does a little college ministry on the side as well, I think, there. And I do mostly middle school students. And we've been doing this for a little while, a little over 20 years each. And love teenagers, man. We still dig it. So thanks for hanging out with us. Yeah, you can find us on social media at Jody Livingston, Jody Y, and Chris Trent. Yeah, we're out there, man. We're on the Instagram and the Twitter and the Facebook and everything.
Yeah, somewhere out there, no doubt, you'll find us.
Hey, how about some shout-outs, man? How about some shout-outs? You got some shout-outs because before you do your shout-out, I guess we need to say where you are. Because I'm not at home. You're not currently in the United States of America.
I am not. I am in. No, I'm in Quebec, Canada. I'm in Montreal, just outside of Montreal, and we'll be in Montreal this week, in and out, doing some ministry in and around here. We are mission tripping it, and so had some time this evening before we get rolling to jump in, because we kind of went back and forth on this episode, when and how we were going to make this happen. And it just worked out that we got everybody back, got everybody to their host homes, chilling until tomorrow morning. We hit the ground running tomorrow morning. And so
are you going to spend a lot of loonies while you're there?
Listen, man,
I just Googled Canadian words.
You just Googling Canadian words.
And a loony is a slang for a dollar.
Dollar.
Eh?
Yeah, so I am in Quebec, which is
I don't know what that means.
It's like I'm in like French Canadian territory here.
Okay.
So, which I don't know French. I took Spanish. Not that I know Spanish, but I've learned some over the last few years. And
you gonna get some poutine?
Oh yeah.
Is that how you say it?
We went to Tim Hortons today, and because that's
fries, gravy, and lots of cheese curds.
Gosh, it's so good, man. So good. Yeah. So I am in. Are you
gonna make some Canuck friends? Canuck friends. That's another word for Canadian. That's another name for Canadian.
I feel like I should just apologize for you to everybody on your behalf right now. Like. So shout out to all of the people who are listening who are in any part of Canada.
Did you know you're going to get a double-double? That's a coffee with 2 creams and 2 sugars. What? I'd be up for a double-double.
I just take coffee black. I had a really good vanilla latte at Tim Hortons today, actually.
And then finally, don't forget your Canadian bacon.
Hey, you know what Canadian latte is?
I don't know what's Canadian latte.
It's got maple syrup in it.
Oh, that'd actually be pretty good.
It is good. It's very, very sweet.
Well, shout out Canadian people. Say hey to Jody if you see him. He's out there.
Yeah, man. We bring our high school students up here and love it. Love it.
Hope you guys have a great week for sure. Well, hey, we have a sponsor here at the Longer Haul Podcast, and we're super thankful to have these guys jumping in and supporting us. But if you are looking, here we are in the middle of summer and fall is coming. And if you are interested in, maybe making a change when it comes to curriculum, we love the guys and gals over at YM360. That's Youth Ministry 360. They do a super phenomenal job with Bible study curriculum. They've also got student devotionals, Disciple Now resources, and youth leader development stuff, and a book by yours truly. And they also do Generate Camp as well. And I'm actually headed in 2 weeks. A week after next, I'm headed to Generate Camp. And so we love these guys. We trust them, and we're really appreciative that they're helping us out a little bit with keeping this thing afloat. And so we would love for you as a listener, if you're in the market, man, for some new curriculum, especially, just check those guys out. And there's 20% off discount for you there on your next order if you use the code Longer Haul. And of course, there's a couple exclusions there, like any fine print kind of things, but they're great, man. Good stuff.
Save some money. Good things. Save some money.
I love them. So
support your favorite podcast.
Yeah. Youth Ministry 360. Say what up to those guys.
Yeah, they're awesome. So we got a cool topic. How about before we jump into the topic, you want to explain this, kind of where this came from?
Yeah. So, Jody and I, like probably you that are, listening here, we're on several different youth ministry Facebook groups out there. And, because there are a ton of different Facebook groups you could be a part of as a youth pastor. And
did you know there's a super secret Longer Haul?
That there is a Longer Haul
podcast,
and I do like ours too, because it's it's a smaller group of folks, currently still less than 100, but I think it's still less than 100. But there are some that have like thousands or whatever, so which is great. And from time to time, you and I, we're texting each other all the time these days, and from time to time we'll see a topic and we'll like, man, that would make a really great podcast episode. And one topic that we've seen come up multiple times over the year or so that we've been, really thinking about this a ton is, youth pastors that are in situations where their churches seem to not like teenagers. And that comes in different forms. Maybe that's like the senior adults aren't crazy about teenagers, or it's a certain group of adults that don't like teenagers. But generally speaking, it's just this idea of what to do when your church doesn't like teenagers, or there's kind of an overall feeling towards that. And you and I both have been in situations where we've felt that before. So we thought we would take a few moments and just share some of our thoughts about some things we've done, some things we've learned over the years about how to make that a little better. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Yeah,
absolutely. So today's topic, youth ministry when your church doesn't like teens, which sounds weird, but that's a real thing. That's a legitimate thing. Yeah. So here we go. You ready?
Ready.
We'll jump in. All right, here we go.
And now we're pleased to bring you our feature presentation.
All right. So you got some thoughts on this? I've got some thoughts on this.
Yeah,
for sure.
I definitely, and I'm kind of a list maker kind of guy. If you've listened to much, you kind of know that about me. But here, I'll jump in with some of my things here as well, Jody, and you just kind of jump in also. But here's kind of the first thing when I started jotting down just some ideas on this particular topic, what to do when your church doesn't like teenagers. I started with this: go the extra mile on seemingly minor things. And you know what? Here's what I mean by that. So go the extra mile on seemingly minor things. And here they are. Clean the bus. You go on a youth trip and you get back, do things like clean the bus out. Make sure you've got a plan for that. Pick up the youth section. Like maybe if you're at a church that has where most of your kids sit in the same location, or maybe there's a certain place in the church the kids seem to all hang out, or maybe your church has Wednesday night supper or something crazy like that, go ahead and go the extra mile and clean and have a plan with some adults to kind of help pick up and, help teenagers learn how to do that themselves as well. Right. But be responsible for that. Again, going the extra mile on seemingly minor things, be on time, getting out of like whatever service. In other words, if you're leaving, say like a Sunday school type setting and go into the worship service, be on time for those things. It's those little things, what seem little to us, that add up to be big things for people who are struggling. And I wish this weren't true. I wish we were in a situation where all adults just love teenagers like everybody listening to this podcast loves teenagers. But the fact is, some don't, right? And so we don't want to give them reasons. We want to try to eliminate minor things, little things that could add to that. And listen, man, if you have like a church van or church bus and, the senior adults all go out to the church bus to get ready to go on a little lunch thing after church on Sunday, and it's, trashed from the Friday night bowling event you went on. Not a good
Or the gas tank is empty.
Or the gas tank's empty.
Because you got back late and you didn't fill it up.
Yeah. What comes to your, anything else comes to your mind, Jody, on that in terms of minor things?
Well, I think a lot of times, for me, you think of the stereotypes that people have towards teenagers, right? They don't care. They're lazy. They're messy. They're rude. And, those types of things. If you can go out of your way to remove those in the sense of like, just make sure things are cleaned up, make sure that they're on time, make sure that when they, like if you're doing an event that you're finishing, those things that you're talking about kind of removes and starts to break down that stereotype, for them. Don't color outside of the lines. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And listen, I'm not making any promises here with any of these ideas. There are still going to be those adults that are grumpy and grouchy.
Sure, yeah.
And it don't matter what you do, right? But we don't want to, sometimes youth pastors, though, because they feel like people, they just kind of throw in a towel and they don't try on anything. They don't like the teenagers, and I'm just saying we need to be responsible and do, go the extra mile. And if you start to go the extra mile over time, it'll really pay off, I think. So.
Yep. That's good.
Yep. Here's something else I wrote down. I guess this would be number 2 if we're not really counting, but, I think this one's huge and I'd be interested in some things you've done to make this happen. But I wrote this: the youth pastor has to become a friend to the congregation.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So what I mean by that is you can't allow it to become an us versus them. You can't fall into that trap. Not that it's a trap, but I think you know what I mean. Like you can't fall into it. You've got to become a friend. Matter of fact, if you do, and I'm thinking, and it's not always senior adults. It could be, it could be empty nesters, which are kind of borderline senior adults, but they're not really. I say that because I'm about to be one in 4 years. But I'm thinking about, man, if you become friendly to those folks at a Wednesday night supper or at some kind of fellowship or at an event where you start to go to some of these extra things and you start to have conversations with people and you get to know these people. One of the best things I ever did, I played men's softball for a while at my former church, man. What's so funny about what? You don't think I play men's softball? What are you talking about?
I think church softball is scary.
Well, we had a great team, and
I'm sure you did. I'm sure you had an amazing team,
dude. I'm not gonna go there, but 3-time champions. Okay, so that said, what I'm saying, but as a result of that, 2 things happened. One, I got to know guys that weren't involved in youth ministry, but we were teammates. So guess what? They developed a like for me, so therefore they liked the youth ministry. Not only that, Wendy's sitting in the stands with some of the other wives and stuff, sometimes she'd come to games, Well, guess what? Same thing. And so as a result of that, when we became friends to the congregation, we didn't just focus on teenagers and have that attitude of, oh, like adults or whatever, man, it resulted in, well, they liked us. So therefore they liked teenagers. Again, not all, but some.
I love that. And I think as you're talking, I'm thinking maybe, I don't know. And I haven't seen your list, so I don't know what you have on there, but there's three things I thought of that I kind of jotted down when you're talking. One is, I think it's really important when you are being that advocate for your student ministry that you're casting a really consistent vision for what the youth ministry is, why teenagers matter to the church, and not just from they're the future of the church kind of thing, but what is it that teens bring to the table? Why is it important that the church invests in that? And not a guilt thing, but just a really consistent vision for that when you have moments, when you have opportunities to do that. I think too, kind of like what you're saying along those lines, is you've got to create moments and opportunities where you invite them in. So, win the critics to your side, win friends from critics, if that makes sense. And that doesn't happen overnight, but look for ways to serve those that may be most critical of your youth ministry and invite them in, give them opportunities to sit down with some teenagers. And maybe that means your kids are serving them. Maybe that means you just do like a luncheon and you just pair them up.
Yeah.
And let them
go ahead. Keep going. My bad.
Yeah. I was gonna say, just let them hear each other's story. I remember years ago, we took a group to camp, and that year, Thursday of camp, instead of doing a rec, everybody went and did missions stuff at this particular camp. And our group went to, some nursing home stuff. And I remember share groups that night listening to the kids talk about just how encouraging and amazing it was to hear these senior adults and folks that they didn't know just share their story with them. And there's something powerful about story. When you get a teenager sharing their story with an adult and an adult sharing their story with a teenager, man, bridges are built and friendships are made and mentorships begin to happen. And all of a sudden now we're starting to see what Titus 2 looks like lived out and fleshed out. But even then, it takes time. It takes time to do that.
Yeah. One thing that came to my mind as we were talking about also how to become a friend to the congregation, don't underestimate those moments that are given to you as a minister on staff that you probably don't necessarily enjoy. And specifically, I'm thinking about like hospital visits, for instance.
Yeah.
I can't say that I've always enjoyed them. Hospital visits, that is. And I can't say that I still can't say that I, enjoy them, but I know the value, I don't have to go as much now, but I probably go 12 or so at least times a year now. Used to, it was like a weekly responsibility for me. But man, again, you visit a family that doesn't have teenagers and you go minister to them in the hospital, just visit them. They become a fan of yours. And as a result, that's going to impact how they think of the student ministry, and they're going to have your back. Typically, not always, but typically. Yeah. So I think that's
it's good. Have you ever taken students with you when you do those visits?
Technically the answer to that is yes, but only if there's a leaning towards ministry. So if it's a kid that's like thinking about maybe doing ministry, it's a little bit harder now because now I work with primarily 6th, 7th, 8th graders, as the middle school pastor.
Yeah, that's true.
But prior to that, when I had older students, Yeah, big time. And I especially take my interns now, and
Yeah.
people that work, because it's not natural, but it's good. I mean, it's a good thing to do.
I just think there's a tendency for us in this discussion to think of, and even really the title we're giving this and the way this conversation often goes is that the church doesn't like teens. But I think on the flip side of that, what you will find in a lot of cases is that the teens don't really like the church either. And so finding ways,
Yeah, agreed.
to get teens to see the Lord working, whether it's maybe like you're saying in a hospital visit, right? If I can take a high schooler or a couple high school kids,
Yeah.
Or even some middle school kids for that matter, and come in and maybe they're just going with me when I'm there. Maybe I'm praying with somebody before surgery or checking on somebody afterwards. And it just makes it personal. It kind of comes back to that idea of story again.
Yeah. I do think, Jody, here's one thing, and I don't know where this fits into this conversation. So I may be about to chase a rabbit, and I don't know. We may want to be careful here, but part of it is a little bit, the way you can make a church, when it comes to teenagers loving the church or the church loving teenagers, I feel like a lot of times the way we do youth ministry feeds that in a way that's not helpful. And here's what I mean. Too often we're doing youth ministry in a way where it just completely caters to the kid, and kids have no skin in the game.
Yeah, sure.
Like, hey, show up to this event. We'll have youth workers when you get here, set out the chairs, put the chairs up, set out the pizza, set out the drink, or set. I'm using the word sit instead of set. Set out the chairs, do all of this stuff. And and the adults, they're going to clean up after you as well. You just play. You just play and have fun. And I think youth ministry too often is like that. And too often we don't grab kids and allow kids to participate. And that's a philosophical type thing. And that's probably we could probably do a whole episode on that. But I do think that contributes though, because if the teenagers have no skin in the game, if they have no dog in that hunt, whatsoever, it's going to be harder for them to love that, whereas opposed to, if you allow them to recognize what it takes to do these things, let them be a part of that stuff,
That's good.
Get grief, man. They're about to be adults anyway.
Yeah.
So that'd be,
we say that a lot. We tell them often, you are becoming right now the men and women you'll one day be.
Sure.
And so if we wait until they are quote unquote men and women before we start requiring or expecting them to contribute, we've done them a great disservice.
But let's get real though. I could see where some adults would get frustrated with teenagers if all they feel like teenagers do is take.
Sure. Well, I deal with that even with our college students.
So we want to try to create an environment from time to time where it's not take, but rather it's participate. We do this together.
When it's not a fundraiser, right? Like that seems like for a lot of times students aren't really serving or participating unless it's a fundraiser of some kind or it's Youth Sunday.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Yeah.
And so
what I'm saying is literally, I'm saying like it's okay when you have a big fellowship thing or whatever to get kids to help do stuff. That's all I'm saying. And
no, I love it.
And including, now on the flip side of that, you want to protect your teenagers from being this scapegoat every time, the church needs, the leaves need raked at the church. Oh, let's get the teenagers. Can't stand that. But so there's a weird balance there. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
How about this? Guard against being too defensive. I wrote that down. I just wrote teenagers are always going to get hit with unfair labels, and we need to just get over it every once in a while. Try to avoid being too defensive, because if we just live in that defensive mode all the time, that's just not going to help over the long time, the long haul in this thing.
Yeah, well, and I think we take it personal too, and maybe rightly so. We feel passionate, called to minister to these. So we kind of feel like we're representing a generation that maybe are being misrepresented or misunderstood. And so even though it's not necessarily us, we feel like it's us, and maybe, if we were honest here, sometimes we get defensive because it's not really about the teenager, but we feel like it's a lack of validity of what we are called to do.
Yeah, sure.
And so we've got to recognize that sometimes it's not really about us, right? And so,
well, and often when we're super passionate about something too, we think everybody ought to be passionate about it. And the fact is that's just not true. Listen, bro.
Except for motorcycles.
What'd you say?
Except for motorcycles.
Except for motorcycles. You're just saying that, Jody, because okay. So rabbit trail. I just got back from, so it's the end of 4th of July week right now. And I just got back from Wagerville, Alabama, where my in-laws are from, which is an awesome, I use the word podunk, but I use that in a very affirming way. It is podunk and it's awesome because it's podunk. But my father-in-law has a Harley and I've started learning how to ride, and you're already, that's kind of your main source of transportation, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But I've fallen in love with it. So anyway, I've got like 2 hours riding experience. Woohoo!
But we're fans.
Yeah, we're totally. But so when we're passionate about something, we kind of feel like everybody. But here's the thing: I know there are people at the church that are passionate about working in preschool, but dude, I am not crazy about preschool ministry at all. But I respect preschool ministry.
Yeah, sure.
And I understand though why some people would love it and not love teenagers. I get that
because of the goldfish.
That may be it. And so, but I think we just every once in a while we need to be like, okay, I get why you don't like teenagers. That's fine. But to try to create a respect level there, I mean, that's one thing. But I think we just have to be careful about being too defensive about the whole thing.
Yeah, I agree. That's good.
So I would say this here also, as we're thinking about this, what to do when your church doesn't like teenager. I would do a spiritual checkup on your youth ministry. When it comes to just an honest honest look at, is your youth ministry focused on only the fun and not enough spiritual? So I think it would be worth just doing an honest evaluation of, okay, outside looking in, what do people see when they see my youth ministry or our youth ministry? Are they aware of the spiritual things that are happening? Because too often it's only easy to see the crazy and the wacky and the fun. So again, if you're honest about that, you can go, well, I can see why parents or adults that don't really have a dog in the hunt, why they would feel the way they feel. It's like all we do is play. It looks like all we do is play. So with that, I think you just got to be careful with the image that you give off. Especially if you're doing, if you're doing camp videos or mission trip videos or DNOW videos and those type of things, just make sure you're being intentional with what you're showing. And not just show the crazy, but also show the spiritual. You talked about stories earlier. Make sure that the stories of the spiritual growth that is taking place is being exposed and is being told and talked about. Maybe take the time to promote not just the wacky fellowship thing that you have coming up, but also promote the spiritual Bible study type things as well. Or let's say you are going to have a wacky something, but there's also going to be a spiritual side to it. Make sure you include that in the promotion so that whoever's sitting there reading the church bulletin on Sunday morning that has no dog in the hunt, but they see that and they don't just see, oh, hey, we're going bowling, but we're also ending that night with a, Bible study or whatever you're going to do there. I don't know. I'm not saying, now let me be clear. I'm not saying you should or you have to do sometimes, dude, we just do fun to do fun. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that personally. I don't think you have to have a devotional at everything you do. That's just me, but
No, I agree. I don't think so.
But that said, I do think you have to be careful with the image that you're giving off. And sometimes you just got to step out and go, okay, what do people see? And is it possible that all they're seeing is wacky? And if so, no wonder they don't like, because the resources are going to this. No wonder they don't like teenagers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All that money. Well, and I think what happens is you unintentionally communicate to on a broader sense what success is, and that ends up feeding the monster. You're because of what you're showing, what you're talking about. You're communicating that success in your ministry is goofy, fun, and there's no depth. There's nothing there, and which I think is what often drives people wanting to know about numbers so often. And so I think when we can communicate not just the numbers, because those matter, they're important, but we are communicating on a broader scale those deeper things that are taking place. And we're all of that, I think, falls in this idea of casting vision of what God is doing. When people see, when believers see God at work, they're going to get excited behind that, and they're going to want to support that. And
yeah, and so that leads into one of the things that's related to this, but it was another thing I wrote down, and I just wrote down give reports. So the importance of following up and celebrating those type of things. Listen, man, if you are like, hey, we're going to camp, and you're like, hey, we need help going to camp. We're having a hard time getting enough money to go to camp, and we got to have the car wash to go to camp, and we need your help going to camp, and we need to camp and to camp and to camp. And then you go to camp and you get back and you don't give a report. You are making a mistake. You have got to follow up with hey, everybody, you know how all you've been doing is talking about camp. Let us tell you what happened and what God did through your generosity as a result of what you helped out with. These kids trusted Christ, or these kids made a decision to walk closer to Jesus. These are the things that we did as a result. If you have a way of knowing specific people that contributed specific ways, dude, I know we live in digital world and we don't think of it like this, but a letter that you send to those people that says, hey, thank you. I wanted you to know what all happened and if it's a mission trip, I wanted you to know what we did, what we accomplished. And by your generosity, by your gift, here's how it helped. And we believe you were a part of that. The mission trip.
I'm a huge fan of like handwritten thank you cards.
Yeah. I'm telling you, dude, like over time, people will start loving that. And one way, another part of that as well, you could too, what would feed into that, one person that you could thank possibly would be if you're going to do a camp or you're going to do a mission trip or something, or D-Now. You can technically even do this for your Sunday morning stuff, but to build up a prayer team of adults that you're asking them, hey, will you sign up and pray for this event? And then you've captured, and you take the time to write out a 21 days leading up to the trip. And then you have a list of people that you can turn around and say, hey, thank you for praying for us. I wanted to let you know what happened as a result of that. Again, it just builds that. It's going to be hard for people, man, to keep hating on teenagers, dude, if you're building up that culture. That said, I guess we're kind of saying, Jody, tell me if I'm wrong or if this is too, harsh. But when your church doesn't like teenagers, I think it's kind of your job to make that right as a youth pastor.
No,
I mean, is
I agree.
that piling on?
No, you're an advocate. You're like the ambassador for them.
Now, I don't mean it all falls on your shoulder, and if it never changes, you're a failure. I don't mean that, but I am saying it's your response. It's part of the gig. I think it's part of the gig.
I agree.
To learn how to build that bridge between, the adults and the students.
And I think depending on your personality, you'll respond to that differently. Like my personality is like, I love a challenge. So tell me I can't do something, and I just want to rise to meet the challenge, or at least give my best effort to do so. And so if you're that if that's your personality, then you're going to respond well to that. If you're not, then maybe that's a little more of a struggle for you. It may not come as natural. But yeah, I think you've got to be the one to go and bridge and close that gap. And I think that's a healthy thing, I think that's a needed thing. I think it requires some humility that's often not present in youth ministry, youth pastors. It requires some meekness, some gentleness at times. It requires just an authentic love for the church outside of the people that you immediately serve. And all of that then kind of comes as an overflow of that as you kind of tie these two generations and groups of people together.
What you just said there about love for the church makes me think that it's also super important that you're cheering on other ministries,
Yeah.
Because if you're cheering on other ministries and you're supporting them, I don't mean you got to be at every single thing, but cheering them on. If you happen to be on a staff with, where you've got, a children's pastor and a youth pastor and maybe a preschool, I don't know, multiple pastors though, cheering those people on, being for them can help.
Well, I think even in a situation where maybe there's not multiple staff, but you think of those people who may be critical of teens, there's probably something in the church, some area of ministry in the church that they are passionate about. And if you begin to champion that and encourage that, it's going to be really hard for them to continually criticize yours.
Yeah, totally, man. Totally.
So it's cool.
Yeah, man.
I got one that's more of a pet peeve for me.
Yeah, what you got?
And this is more of a.
I'm kind of mostly done. So what you got? You got anything?
Okay, well I have two. One won't be surprising. The other is just more of an annoyance. Don't be rebellious just because. Like in the sense of, well, they're not going to like the teens, so we're just going to do our thing, and God will be honored in what the teens do, and if they don't get on board, then they don't get on board, and so we're just going to do our thing and burn bridges along the way. And I just think sometimes that mentality can feed in somewhere, and certainly that doesn't help. Just being rebellious for the sake of being rebellious. We've talked about that before. I just hate it. I think it's destructive and not healthy and not good for your teens either, because that's the mentality they're going to carry into adulthood. Then.
Yeah, totally.
So I don't like that. The other thing is you just got to stay put. It really is. This is something that kind of happens over the longer haul of your ministry in your context, and you may not win them over in 3 months or 6 months or a year or 2 years. It may be 5-6 years down the road, but consistency of all these things we've talked about, the consistency of those day after day, week after week, year after year, in the end, longevity and consistency wins the day on this.
Yeah, it really does help. I mean, I think, if a church is going through, youth ministry leaders just every couple of years, it's going to make it hard. Because there's going to be a lack of stability there. So I think, I agree with you 100%. Obviously we do the longer haul so people know what we're about, but when it comes to our commitment to longevity, but it just really does help. and it gets easier, and it does get easier as you get older to build personal relationships with adults. That's all. I mean, I can. I'm in a weird spot. Like, I'm not crazy. Like, anytime I have to go to like an adult thing, it's not my favorite thing. But ironically, when I'm in the room with teenagers and youth workers, I tend to pour a whole lot more of my time now into youth workers because they're pouring their time into teenagers. And so, I mean, adults aren't my favorite, but I tend to get along with adults pretty well these days, I guess,
Well, that's good because you are one. So
yeah, but I'd rather hang out with people who like teenagers though, mostly, you know what I'm saying? I don't mean just for real, but
yeah,
but anyway, it's
agreed.
all good, man. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, good stuff.
Hey, is there anything? Let me ask this as we kind of wrap up here because we have not done this in a while. It's came most episodes kind of comes rather organically. Any resources that are things that you're reading lately, or that we could throw out here for the listeners? I know we didn't talk about that ahead of time, but you'll be happy to know that I just read The Last Arrow. You've talked about that book so many times. I got it and read it, finished it.
I like it. Do you like it?
It was great. Yeah, it was great.
I told you I did.
Hey, I've got one.
I told you I did a whole talk on parenting to the last arrow. That's ridiculous.
Yeah,
that's a good talk. That I did. I've taught it a couple adult Sunday school. Email me if you want a copy of it, and I'll send it to you. Chris at thelongerhaul.com. I'm not putting it in the show notes page, so you're gonna have to email me for it.
I know. I've given up. So here's a resource that is actually very relevant to what we're talking about. And this is, we mentioned this a couple episodes ago, or I mentioned this when we were talking to Clay Scroggins about leading when you're not in charge. But it's a book. It's an older book. It's still around and out there. You can get it readily. I just was actually in a bookstore, a real bookstore, this week and saw this book. But it's by Dale Carnegie. It's called How to Win Friends and Influence People. If you've never read this book, I highly, highly cannot recommend enough that you go and get this book. It is so good and practical, and that's kind of what we're talking about, just winning friends here towards teens and towards your ministry. But even beyond that, just as you serve in your ministry and you work around people, just really, really good. Grab it on Audible. If you're not a reader, you can listen to it. It's on Audible. You can find them on Amazon. I'll link to both in the show notes. But have you ever read that book? Have you ever read it?
Do you have it on?
Oh, it's so
is the
good,
Audible
man.
version good?
Yeah, that's originally how I read it. That's how I read most of stuff.
So I've got one I'm actually reading through. I'm about halfway through, but I feel comfortable recommending it for sure. Actually going through this book with our interns. It's called Just Do Something by Kevin DeYoung.
Yeah, with Kevin DeYoung. We did that with our college students.
It is good. So good. Like, it is amazing. So if you're looking at a book to read through with maybe a group of seniors, I think I'm about to take my son and some of his buddies through it. They're seniors.
It's short,
super
too,
short,
which is really good.
Stories, well written. It's all about it's called Just Do Something, a liberating approach to finding God's will. It's fabulous. Fabulous. Be amazing if we get Kevin DeYoung on here, awesome. Man. That'd be amazing. So
I'm sure he listens. Sure. Kevin, if you're listening,
okay, whatever.
Email Chris. Chris is thelongerhaul.com.
Good times, yeah. But that's what I'm reading right now, and I'm listening to a couple things as well. But I mean, nothing that I'd recommend. I am listening to Steve Martin. Steve Martin's autobiography? If you write it,
yeah. If he wrote it,
he reads it. I'm listening to it. It's amazing. There's a couple weird parts, but I love comedy, man. I love comedy. So anyway, good times.
Cool. Well, you can head over to the show notes page, thelongerhaul.com/episode 067 for links to those things. there. So that's thelongerhaul.com/episode 067. If you have not already done so, head over to YN360 and YN360.com. Check out those guys. Be sure to use the promo code LONGERHAUL. You can save yourself 20% there. And jump into the Facebook super secret, top secret, Longer Haul Podcast Facebook group on the Facebook. And you can head over there, let us know once this episode drops what you think, thoughts are, all that stuff. I think that's it, right? You got anything else?
No, man. Hope you have a great week. So we're recording this on Saturday night, and so you're there all this week, I guess, doing the mission thing. So hope it's good. And I guess we will say, we're having I almost did this one by myself with our schedules being like they are. So you may record next week without me. But we're going to try to we're going to try to stay on task or on track, I should say. And
school year's coming.
Look forward to it. So have a great week, man, in Canada. Learn some Canadian words.
Yeah, buddy. I'll bring you back some maple syrup. It's good. The maple syrup is so good. All right, well, that's it. Head over to the show notes page, subscribe to the podcast, check out YN360.com. We'll see you in the next episode.
Awesome. Thanks for listening, folks.
Thanks for listening to the Longer Haul Youth Ministry Podcast at www.thelongerhaul.com.